Hello and welcome back to Toolbox Talks on the Site Shed, and today we're trying something new. We've got a new format we're rolling out and we're calling it Chit Chat, and I'm running it with my buddy and colleague Nathan from City Plumbing up in Brisbane, and we're just talking about current affairs that are happening in the industry. It could be local in Australia, could be abroad, could be a combination. So we're just talking about something general in each series. It's completely unrehearsed and it's very raw. And it's just two guys talking about current issues. And look, we really hope you like it. We just wanted to make it something that's a little bit unstructured, a little bit more unstructured than the other episodes. And we're sure you're going to love it. And if you do love it, let us know. We're pretty much guided by you guys. So leave us some comments in the show notes, or leave us a review on one of the on SoundCloud, iTunes, or Stitcher. And with that, we can basically steer the direction of these segments. So stay tuned.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Hello and welcome to Toolbox Talks. And in today's segment, we're trying something with a little bit of a different approach. We're going to mix it up a little bit today with a different format. And I've got my mate Nathan Cooper on the phone, and Nathan is from City Plumbing up in Vegas, Australia. And we're going to do a bit of a chit-chat session. So we haven't prepared anything here. What we're going to be doing with these episodes is we're just going to be talking about an issue in current affairs that, currently going on in either Australia or around the world. And we're just going to have a talk about it and pick each other's brains, and we're going to make it a bit of fun, a bit jovial. So look, if you like this format, let us know in the show notes, or let us know in an iTunes or Stitcher review. And we can steer it pretty much any way we want. So Nathan, welcome to the microphone.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
How's sunny Brisbane?
Yeah, well, it's raining. A little bit like down your way, isn't it?
Yeah, it's rubbish here. So this is a bit of a, obviously you've been listening to the podcast for a while, and, I suppose one thing that I have always wanted to do is get somebody that's sort of in the trenches on the show a little bit more regularly, and we can just talk about things that are happening, because obviously I'm a tradesman originally, but I don't work as a plumber these days. However, you're still pretty heavily involved within that side of the business, so it's good to have somebody that's deep in the trenches. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, that's all right. Just to be clear, though, I'm not in the trenches all the time.
No,
I tend to just sit more in the office these days.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. So let's give our listeners a bit of an insight as to who you are, so they can get a bit of a feel for what your background is. Where did you're a plumber, right?
Yeah. So I started plumbing back in 1996. I started my apprenticeship just here in Brisbane, and worked for many of the big companies around Brisbane. If anyone around the area knows some of the bigger ones, and basically, jobs like hospitals and high-rise buildings and that sort of thing. So, like many guys have in Brisbane, there was a big scene sort of through the mid to late 90s and early 2000. There was a lot of construction work here, so it was fairly easy to get constant work. I went through one of those group training schemes.
What's that?
So, group training scheme is a business that it basically is government subsidised, and they employ apprentices in all sorts of different trades, and then they hire out these young guys, and different companies can have them for a period of time. If they want them for a week, then that's that's okay. But some of the jobs I had, basically I was with some companies for up to 18 months. It might be for the term of the job. You might be put on a site for a high-rise building, and there might be 9 months to a completion, and you stay there till basically they don't need you anymore.
So was that similar to? I know in Sydney we had master plumber apprentices.
Yeah.
Is that a similar sort of? Yeah,
it's similar.
Okay.
Up here they used to have a company. I think they were called GTA, Group Training Australia. So basically they were any sort of trade. They probably had 20 different trades. So you'll have bricklayers and blocklayers and concreters and carpenters, and they pretty much did everything, including plumbing. The one that they didn't do for some reason, I'm not sure the reason why, but it was electrical. I think the electricians sort of kept theirs pretty tied in, much the same as maybe master plumbers in Sydney. We have the same thing up here now. Master plumbers in Brisbane have their own apprentices, and by all accounts, from what I've heard, it's a pretty good operation there.
Yeah, that's something that we're definitely going to talk about in future episodes. I think that whole apprenticeship issue and the lack of declining interests, and I suppose there's a whole bunch of topics around apprenticeships that I'd like to address. I know you've employed many apprentices over the years and qualified many tradesmen, haven't you?
Yeah. I think I've put about 5 or 6 through my business who are now good tradesmen for one reason or another.
Yeah.
And so that was always good. But there's definitely, like you said, there's definitely been a decrease in apprenticeships, and there's some issues that I believe that's been created by the government around this, to do with compulsory levels of wages and other things like that. Then there's some society issues as well, I think, with apprenticeships, with young people these days not wanting to go into that type of work. It's no longer a sexy type of a job, really. They're not trained in school. They're not given a start in school, basically, to say, that apprenticeships are a decent and reasonable job that you should be going for.
Yeah. Well, look, as you know, that's one of the main myths that I'm trying to dispel with the Site Shed podcast, is that where you doing a trade is by no means a default option, and I don't know why there's that stigma in the marketplace, or I suppose I just want to bring some awareness around, and speaking to people, like yourselves and a lot of the other guests we've had on the show, your Kenny Chapmans and Alan Fergusons and all these guys that have just built these empires from, stemming from a trade background. Even, Clinton from Tradie Pad, like those guys, started as a plumber, and now they're sort of running a technology business that helps tradies. Like, there's so many, you can open so many doors, and I think
absolutely
communicating that is, if we can get better at communicating that, I think there's probably a better chance that people are going to be, as kids especially, they're going to be more inclined to enter into an apprenticeship when they're younger. I think there's a mentality, they're like, well, I would do an apprenticeship, but firstly, I want to develop an app and have Google buy me out for $1 billion overnight, because that happens all the time.
Yes.
And then secondly, I'd like to do a plumbing apprenticeship, but I don't really want to dig, and so maybe they could just get a labourer to do that for me or something.
It's very true. Yeah, I'm not sure it's a total lack of work ethic. Some people tend to suggest that young people these days don't want to work hard. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think many young people do want to work hard. They just perhaps have heard negative things about the construction industry, and basically, they feel maybe that the only way to earn decent money is to be living away, as a fly in, fly out worker into the mines and that sort of thing. And we know for a fact that that's definitely dropped away in the last couple of years, especially the last year or so. So that sort of may turn people away from going down that pathway.
Yeah, and that's something we're going to talk about today, I suppose, specifically. There's an article that got sent to me by a friend yesterday, which is from the Triple J Hack blog, and it was talking about what happens to young tradies after the mining boom. And it was really quite an interesting article. I haven't heard the audio from that interview, but that segment, but I imagine it would be pretty good.
Yeah, it's a good show, the Hack Show. You listen to it all the time.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. And I think that there's also a podcast that they turn them into podcasts too, which is good. So you can sort of get back to it at any time. But anyway, before we dive into that, so okay, you served your time up in Brisbane. Then how'd you end up getting into business?
Yeah, so I did my time starting in '96. I think I finished in 2000, and then I went travelling overseas, like many people do, for a few years, and sort of, I wouldn't say I furthered my career over there. I did do plumbing work to earn a living, but it wasn't really a furthering of the career. But when I came back, I sort of I didn't have any experience with I'd only ever done commercial work, so I didn't have any experience with domestic work, and there wasn't a lot of commercial work around. And I really came back and set myself to have my own business, and to do that, I'm not going to basically come back from overseas 3-4 years out of my time without a great deal of experience. As you know, sometimes I think we all think when we finish our apprenticeship that we're, absolute geniuses and we know everything, but it's simply not true. But I wanted to get my own business, and the only way to do that would be to start at the bottom, which means doing, sort of the smaller domestic type thing. You're never going to start a large plumbing business doing high-rise buildings overnight. That's just not going to happen.
Yep.
So basically, I found work with a few different guys and started getting domestic experience, which was really good. At the start, I didn't know a lot about it, so they were quite patient with me. So that was very generous of them. But I turned into an okay plumber, I think, at the time, and basically learned the ropes there, and then decided I'm going to go out on my own. I think that was in 2004, 2005, something like that, and started on my own pathway, and sort of never looked back really from that day on.
Yeah, right. So have you always been in Brisbane?
I haven't always lived in Brisbane. I've always been in Brisbane as far as having my own plumbing business. I've lived in other places, but not for a great deal of time. But yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Brisbane's basically home, yeah.
And now you're running, so you've got your plumbing company and you're also running another business, aren't you?
Yes, I'm starting another business called City Industries, and it's basically offering support to other trades of various descriptions, mainly the plumbing industry, with certain key products, and basically I'm in the process of getting that up and running. I may have it up and going by the time this goes to air. I'm not sure when you put these podcasts to air, but yeah, that's something that I'm pretty excited about. And it's just it's another thing that we can talk about, Matt, down the track is once you may have sort of grown a little bit tired of the industry you've been in or you've done for such a long time, how do you transition out of that and look for opportunities in other areas? So that's basically what I'm doing. I'm creating myself an opportunity in other areas to give myself a bit of a better lifestyle. And you don't want to be on the tools forever. I haven't been on the tools for a long time, but I don't want to have to go back to that for any reason. So I'm looking for a transition out, so that's what I'm doing with this new business. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, this is, as I say, this is one of the messages we preach. Like where you start's what is not always where you end up. However, it's you probably would never have gone down that path if you hadn't have had that trade background originally. So it can open a lot of doors. So there's a strong message out there to all the listeners.
Oh, absolutely. It's a long road. It's a long road. People need to understand that the message that I have heard you talking about this over many podcasts since you've started this, and it's 100% true. It's a long path. You don't have to get to your end result straight away. It's better to be a bit more strategic on what you're going to do to achieve what you want from your business and perhaps from your life. Everyone's different. Some people have families and so on. So yeah,
everything changes
constantly.
Yeah. All right. So look, today, just for the listeners out there, basically what we do with these segments is we just pick a topic that's, currently happening, and we're just going to talk about it. We haven't prepared anything here. It's just a general chit chat between two blokes, and we just want to, I suppose, talk about something specific so that we can. It's normally something that's currently in the media. And today we've chosen, what happens to young tradies after the mining boom. Now, as for all of you listeners that are not in Australia, you may or may not be aware there was a huge mining boom in Australia. A lot of it was stemming from the iron ore industry over in places like Western Australia, and that has since come to an end, which means there's a lot of jobs that were that have been, I suppose, a lot of people that are out of work as a result of that. And I think the reality here, like this article that we're specifically talking about, I mean, I know, like I go to Bali quite a lot. I surf over in Bali, and I meet so often when I was over there, I would meet people like Australians that were living in Bali as I suppose their like their residential address, and they were flying from Bali into the mines in Western Australia to work, and then they'd do their 2 weeks there, and they'd fly back to Bali for a week, and they'd live in Bali for a week. Mate, it was just an amazing lifestyle. They live on they live on site in these mines, so they have all of their expenses paid for. Because they're living on site, they get a lot of allowances. So there's a lot of danger money, away from home money, like all this, I suppose, is government regulated. What do you call it? Not funds, allocations specific to that job.
Yeah,
so
like a subsidy type of thing.
Subsidies, allowances is what
allowances. Yeah. Okay.
So they make huge amounts of money. They don't really have any expenses, so they're just banking all this cash, and then they're living these lifestyles in places like Bali because they can. Like a lot of these guys are so really young, so they don't really have the commitments of family and mortgages and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like a fairy tale lifestyle from a trade point of view, but then now all of a sudden it's kind of, for the last few years it's dried up dramatically. And I know even cities, that cities like Perth, they're feeling it. They're feeling it hugely because a lot of those employees that were working in the mines, they were sort of basing themselves out of places like Perth, and since the mines have dried up, then they've kind of a lot of those people have left these cities, and as a result, other businesses suffering. So it's
it's like a staggered effect, isn't it?
Right.
Basically, it's a domino effect.
Ripples.
When someone loses work in an area, especially on higher incomes, because no matter how much you earn, you tend to spend most of it, and I think that's an issue that we all have, and that the domino effect of that just goes back down through the actual immediate family and then everything around that. So, if you've got a husband who's a fly in, fly out worker and he's supporting his wife and two or three children, then the roll on effect for that is everyone around the home where his wife and kids are, perhaps their school, all the local shops, like it tends to spread really quickly. And Perth is a really good example of where that's happened, and a lot of people are struggling over there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of places locally, and I'm sure it's probably it may be the case overseas as well. I'm not sure, but I mean, I know there's lots of places around, like even up North Queensland, Townsville, around those sort of areas where there's a lot of mining. They're having similar scenarios happening there. In fact, I know somebody personally who they purchased a corner store / cafe, and there's a huge mine. It wasn't in, I think it was up closer to Rockhampton or somewhere around there, and it was a real little mining town. And they purchased this corner store / milk bar thing, and it was just pumping. Like they were just killing it from the trade they were getting from the mine workers. And then the mine shut down, and the place just literally became a ghost town. Like everyone just left.
Yeah.
They had properties there and all this sort of stuff that they were leasing to the guys working in the mines, and basically everything just dried up. And then the mine reopened again, and then they started taking off again, and then it closed again. And since then, they pretty much had to sell everything. So it's really no way to operate
a business. The highs and the lows. It's just the gap's too big.
Yeah, and I think like one of the strong messages there, which I mean, I was told this, years and years and years and years ago. You never want to be dependent upon one source of income specifically. So I mean, in their instance, they were really much completely dependent upon that mine for their living. Probably not a great scenario to be in. In fact, I remember being taught, if more than 30% of your income is coming from one stream, then that's cause for alarm. You should be sweating on that, because as soon as that falls over, you're in trouble, especially if you're paying staff and mortgages and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Just once that cash flow goes, then you're in serious trouble.
Yeah. So I mean, we have a similar approach with any partners or strategic partners or anything like that. We're really, really conscious of the amount of work that we take from them in retrospect to the grand scheme of the amount of work that we're doing, just so we're sure that, okay, if something happens for one reason or other and, one of them does fall over, then are we going to be sustainable?
Exactly, yeah. No, I did the same thing in my business. I never allowed us to have the majority of work or even a large percentage of work coming from any one source. I used to take on a lot of different jobs for a lot of different clients and really focus on keeping the marketing going, especially when you're busy. You know, I learned that many years ago. It was actually my brother who was told by a guy. My brother was a plumber in Sydney, and he was told by a guy the best time to advertise is when you're extremely busy.
Absolutely.
And that keeps you busy. And I always stuck true to that, and it generally kept us in work a lot of the time when a lot of people didn't have any work, or you know, they were up and down with their volume. It tended to keep us reasonably busy, which was good. So, but the point is, you got to stick to the plan. So that's what we did, and it tended to work okay.
Yeah, I mean, you see it all the time. I've got a lot of mates actually as well. You know, that one of them specifically, he was a plumber, and for years he is a plumber. Well, he's not. He's still doing it, but
Smart guy.
Yeah. He used to work specifically for 3 main builders, and I was always saying to him for years and years and years. I said, mate, you've got to you got to start sort of spreading your wings a bit here. Like, he was comfortable with working for them, and he was busy too. Like, he always had stuff on. But I was always saying to him, mate, you're mad. You should really be, you know, trying to get some work from other places just in case. Like, you never know what's going to happen. And he's always like, no, I'm fine. This is busy. We're flat out. You know, I haven't got time for anything else. And I was like, you know, your mates are the hardest people to try and talk to in every instance. Like,
to give advice to,
mate, they're the last people that are going to listen to you.
Of course.
But sure enough,
what would you know, Matt?
Yeah, that's right. Sure enough, one of the builders went into liquidation, and not only that mean that they basically didn't they weren't paying they weren't paying him the money they owed him. They also they weren't bringing him any more work, and then literally 3 weeks later, one of the other builders took up a different plumbing contractor because they were cheaper. And so he lost 2 of his 3 contracts in the space of a month. He had, I think, 4 or 5 guys on. He was buggered. And
plus the loss of payment from the first guy who went under.
Yeah, that's right. And then
so that knocks his cash flow around straight away. And then when that return work does not come, it's like a 1-2 punch. You know, really, it can really knock you around. It's happened to us. Just hasn't been on that sort of degree.
You just see it so much especially with guys that are working sort of in long contracts, like the construction sort of side of things. Like they're really heavily leveraged and invested into just a couple of companies. If one of them fall over, then they're pretty much screwed.
That's right. So it comes down to it's very difficult to manage large teams across multiple projects. You know, and even the large companies, they might say they're doing it easily, but I don't necessarily think they are doing it easily. Having worked on a lot of those sites, you see, you know, they're super stressed when you see the boss will come to the site and they're really, really stressed out, you know, when they've got quite a few projects on the go and maybe 6 or 8 or 10 guys on each job. You know, it's hard to manage. So you can understand why they tend to throw most of their eggs in one basket.
Yeah, look, I think it's a paradigm as well. I think, the bigger you, like, I don't know if you've been listening to the recent podcasts we've been doing with Ben Stainer on big business, and, you know, who was...
Yeah, I did listen to 1 or 2, yeah.
He was saying, you know, the bigger you become in your business, the bigger everything becomes. The bigger your profit margins, the bigger your payroll, the bigger your problems. He said it's just it's a matter of, I suppose, adaptation. You know, you got to be able to, I suppose, go with the flow of things and build systems around it. Like, that's the key. You know, like if you've got a like a scenario where you are struggling with, you know, managing your staff, there's probably a way that you can build a system around that, or a process that will make that easier for you. I mean, there are companies out there, there are huge companies out there that run relatively well, you know, if not extremely well, just because they have the right systems in place. There's no reason why you can't do it. It's just a matter of, it's a paradigm shift from where you currently are to moving towards that direction.
Yeah, that's true.
So anyway, these kids now, I suppose, and, you know, young adults, they've pretty much gone straight into the mines out of school. They're making this huge money, living this cool lifestyle, buying all the toys and, you know, jet skis and all this stuff. The mines are closed, and one of these kids is saying, I just packed up and thought, what the hell, I'll just go travelling. So he went travelling for 18 months, came back expecting to sort of walk into a similar role. However, that role didn't exist. So now they're feeling like, so they're like, okay, well, let's go get a job. So they go get a job in construction doing what they were doing. And they were like, what? This is how people live? Like, this is the reality? We're working these hours for this much money? Is this some kind of joke? It's just like a massive reality check.
And I think the main problem with that is that starting straight out into a very high paying job is just not realistic. And they've got used to that, basically on a day-to-day basis. So now, like this guy here, just in this article, he says, I didn't like waking up at 6 and being in the rat race for half the money. It's actually not half the money. It's actually what he's on in the city is normal money, and he was on double the money. So
right.
Yeah, he's got it a bit wrong there, but that's just one of the issues that they have when they go in straight out of school and they're getting 150 grand and they're 19 years old. It's hard to turn it down. Anyone has struggled turning that down, really. And when they come back and suddenly realise that the most you can earn in the city might only be 80,000, because it just depends on supply and demand, really. The city operates on a far tighter spectrum. You don't have huge contracts, you don't have subsidies, and you don't have things like the extremely high iron ore price to prop up wages.
Yeah, well, and of course you've got expenses. I mean, when you're living on the mines, they're putting you up in accommodation, they're feeding you.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas when you're working in a job, you don't have a lot of the allowances that you would have when you're working in a mine, and then you've got to pay for your rent, you've got to pay for all your bills, and you've got
to do all the work.
Yeah, you've got expenses, So
some of these guys, Matt, would have been banking more money than what they can earn as a full wage back in the city. If they could have been banking 100 grand a year cash after all expenses, like you're saying. And when they come back to the city, they may not be able to get a job that even pays that in total. Then their expenses might be 60 grand a year to be able to afford a mortgage and do all the things that you're talking about there. So yeah, it's a massive difference. So you can understand why they're a bit disillusioned. But they're sometimes I think people have to know what it's like in reality, so that they can appreciate the good times.
Yeah. So I mean, where do you see this? I mean, obviously the iron ore issue is a massive problem. Like I don't know if the mines will ever recover or revert back to where they were from an employment point of view. I mean, the iron ore prices have fallen from $180 a ton down to $50 a ton now, and there doesn't seem to be much sign of that improving. Where do you see this whole scenario going?
Well, I think even if the iron ore price was to go back up to $180 a tonne, a lot of the work that was generated in the mining boom was in building infrastructure and in actually building mines and building ports and that sort of thing. So it was the sort of things that are periphery to the actual extraction out of the ground and shipping. And a lot of these companies now, Chevron and Rio, BHP, et cetera, they have their mines built so that they have no need to have a 4,000 man mine camp in the town any longer, because the mine is finished and all they do now is get on with the process of shipping the product. It's similar in the city. If a lot of people might imagine, say a Bunnings big box warehouse. It might create 200 jobs or 300 jobs to build that Bunnings over a 9-month or 12-month period, and then when that finishes, all those construction workers they move on, and other people come in and they start moving product. And I don't think the mines are any different. So really, I think the mining booms will come and go. It's like everything. The demand is up and down globally. Countries sign different agreements. China is it's slowed down, but it may pick up again in the next 2 or 3 years. It may pick up again. You don't know. I'm not an economist. I do read a lot of stuff to find out what's going on in this sort of sector.
Yeah.
And that Brazil is cutting prices on iron ore, and Australia sort of felt that quite hard. But things will turn around. You don't know what the government's got in store. Really, they may end up signing an agreement along with these large companies, these large mining companies, with China, and sort of get a little bit of production coming out of Australia again.
I guess the message really is, like these opportunities may present themselves again. However, they're just opportunities. I think people that invest too heavily in them over the long term are likely to get stung again. I've got mates that have done very well out of the mining industry. One in particular, like he did, I think, 5 or 6 years in the mines. He bought a house up in Broome, I think it was, and then they ended up selling that and then moving back to sort of Sutherland Shire or Wollongong down that way, and they bought a place down there. And I mean, he was an electrician, but he did it really well. He didn't spend all the money, and now he's got a young family, and he did really well out of it. But then I think he was one of those people that, like, he treated that position as an opportunity, not as a lifestyle per se. And
yeah, exactly. I think he did the right thing. The mining boom, it may happen again, like you said, it may not. And to hang your hat on that as an absolute reality and just plod along in the hope that, in 2 years' time, we're going to have another 6-year stretch where you can earn a couple of $100,000 on mine sites. I think that's a big mistake. I think it's really up to anyone who's been involved in the mines, and they've come back and they may be struggling a little bit to find continuity of work. They may be struggling, to get. They may be able to get decent work. They may not be able to get decent rates to work at the moment. That's purely supply and demand. But really, the main thing that I would suggest to people involved in that sort of thing is to go out and improve your skills. It's a really important thing to keep improving your skills all the time. The more skills you have, the more people are going to want to pay you to do a more varied amount of things. So it's definitely something to think about.
That's one of the things I especially with, our clients that come through to us at Tradie Web Guys, one of the big things we really try and help them establish is, can they niche themselves in any particular area of their business? Is there anything that they can really focus on as being the expert in the industry at that certain thing? Because it's, it doesn't mean that's the be all and end all of what you have to do. However, it certainly makes it easier from a marketable point of view to be the resident expert in whatever it is, pipe relining, water leaks, waterproofing, whatever it is,
absolutely.
It just makes it an easier marketing target.
Well, that's maybe something we can talk about on another episode, but that's definitely true. If you're a business owner, then niching into certain particular areas is a very clever move. Particularly things that have a higher transaction value. So you're not selling. I'm trying to think of an example in construction. Something that's at a very low price point.
Yeah.
Like a bookshop, if they're selling $10 books, you've got to sell a lot of them to make money,
Mm-hmm.
You're better off selling, if you can come across products that are a much higher transaction value and really niche into that, you can really direct your marketing around that to get a really good return.
Yeah. Anyway, so I suppose in closing, there is a lot of work out there for tradies. I suppose these guys that are coming out of the mining boom, it might be a case of them not actually, like, not having a real grasp on the reality of the industry, like what that work is. But I just like to say, don't be overly disheartened. Like, you've been through a good stage, and you've had a position where you've been able to make good money, and you've probably had an opportunity that most people haven't. Don't go all emo, I suppose, and throw your hands up in the air. This is the end, just because you got to go and get a job that which in reality, that's the job that the industry is. Like you got to go and put those hard yards in from time to time. It's not always going to be smooth sailing.
No.
But then, you never know what's coming around the corner. There could be another opportunity very, very similar. And again, you'd have no idea what could potentially arise as a result of you entering into that position. Could be like whether it's a management position or who knows, it could take you anywhere. So,
of course, yeah. I think another thing, Matt, is a lot of the people involved in the mining boom have been trained in fields that are not necessarily required in general day-to-day life, in any of the cities or larger towns, no matter where they are, anywhere in Australia or the US. And some of the things that they're doing on these mine sites and getting paid good money for, they're just not required skills. So, they managed to, they had a good run. Like this article's talking about one of the young fellas here, and he is an explosives expert, so that's fantastic to be an explosives expert. But how much work will you get in that field in Sydney or Melbourne? There's just not going to be that much work for that sort of thing available. And particularly if there's probably already people that are very grounded and very much entrenched in that industry in these cities, and breaking into that would prove quite difficult.
Yeah, perhaps. Maybe you're right. I mean, but then again, I suppose that, I don't know. I imagine there would be pros and cons of having a skill set that that's niched like that. But again, not like you say, if you can, like you said earlier, if you're always improving your skills and adding to your skill set, then having that as one of your skills, I'm sure would certainly come into value at some point of time. Yeah, I mean it's an interesting point, I suppose. However, again, I think there is plenty of opportunity that may come as a result of having that background.
Oh, totally. And some of the things you're talking about, like management positions and that sort of thing, there's even, if you've got enough now, so you may be able to go into, some form of consulting in certain fields. I know in the plumbing industry, a lot of plumbers have moved away from plumbing as such and become hydraulic engineers or hydraulic consultants.
Yeah,
actually designing plumbing systems. So they're working in an office. They're getting paid. They're in your own business as a hydraulic consultant. You can charge $200 or $300 per hour. Whereas most plumbers are probably charging, depending, in some of the lower price ones are probably around the $70 an hour mark, and some up to $150. So there's a degree of increase there in the capacity of your earnings by improving your skills and getting off the tools. And so it's a good point you make. I just think people should be wary of actually getting trades that perhaps aren't as extensive as some of the other ones that have a lot more reach and can spread into other things. If you're in refrigeration, for example, you can quite easily add electrical to your trade
or plumbing.
So you've got a couple of left and right of you. You've got a couple of things there that you can add onto your existing skills, and you don't have to serve a full apprenticeship. So I know some guys that have actually done that, and they've got themselves an electrical license or a plumbing license in less than 18 months. When they started as a refrigeration mechanic. So that's just I would just suggest that people just take that into consideration and make sure they're doing a job in an industry where basically there is quite a lot of work and there's continuity of work as well.
Yeah, I think a bit of perspective would be good too, like having a bit of long-term perspective over, where that position, could end up. Is it going to be a trade that's going to last? I mean, plumbing, electrical, things like refrigeration, it's always going to be around. Whereas if you look at, some of the trades that have died out a bit over the years, like boiler making and, these kind of things, like when sort of technology has replaced them to a degree.
Absolutely,
you probably wouldn't want to go and invest years and years in, in something that's sort of on the isn't really called for these days.
No, well, it's interesting you say that, because I was just reading last week about the German government is test driving self-driving trucks, and they've started running self-driving trucks between certain zones along certain roads, and this is just the beginning of the end, basically. I think for a lot of the transport industry and a lot of the job sector in the transport industry. If you're a truck driver now, you should really be looking hard at what can I do to improve my skills when my job just disappears because the government allows self-driving trucks to operate and to start transporting goods that I'm currently carrying in my truck.
Yeah.
So it's just little things like this. You keeping an eye on technology, because it's not like it used to be. It's not like it was 10 years ago. It's even not like it was 2 years ago. Technology now is advancing at a huge rate, and it's going to be increasing at a greater and greater rate every single month, year from now on. We're going to have exponential growth with technology and the way it impacts standard day-to-day services. So yeah, I think something like plumbing is a we always come back to talking plumbing because we generally
from plumb
that
stuff.
Industry. Yeah, we're from that industry. So, but plumbing is something that's never going to disappear. People will always need to wash their hands and have a shower and use toilets and so on. Restaurants, will always be serving food some way or another using gas and so on.
Yeah.
So these sort of things are going to be very difficult to introduce technology that will replace a lot of that industry. So it's a bit more of a safe industry. This is just my opinion. It's a bit more of a safe industry. I don't know what you think about that.
For sure it is. I mean, I don't know if you heard the episode the other week with Kenny Chapman out of the United States, and he was saying at one stage he runs a drain clearing business over in Colorado, and he was saying that at one stage the US government went on strike, and when the US government went on strike, the whole not so much the economy, but like the stock market and everything just basically crashed. Like everything just went, on hold. And his business did not fluctuate one bit. He said it didn't matter what the government was doing. It didn't matter what the stock market was doing. People's drains were still getting blocked.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's like bars and pubs and that sort of thing. There's in the good times and in the bad times, people are either celebrating or they're
commiserating,
wallowing in their own pity, I guess. And people are always going to be buying drinks and eating out, I suppose. So yeah, some industries they're just bulletproof, and it's just a good idea to get yourself aligned with an industry that is bulletproof, and then what you do in that industry is the important thing.
Yeah. So all those listeners out there, young people that think, I'm going to go to university and do marketing. Yeah, good luck with that.
Good luck with that. and in 10 years' time, when they've recovered their HEX fees.
Yeah, and they've realised that the marketing landscape is just a completely outsourced realm then. So
absolutely.
Anyway, let's wrap this up. So that was good. That was a good chat. We'll come back again and we'll talk about something else that pops up in a couple of weeks. And hope your listeners enjoyed that. If you did, once again, leave us a note in the show notes. Nathan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Matt.
And we will talk to you soon. That's a wrap. So if you haven't already, head across to thesiteshed.com and register for our Toolbox Talks, where you'll be regularly sent great episodes just like this straight to your inbox, so you'll never miss one. If you want to join the community, you can head across to thesiteshed.com/members, where for a small monthly fee, you'll get access to regularly updated training material, as well as access to our forum, where you can mingle and collaborate with trade-based business owners just like you from all over the world. If you're enjoying this podcast, please head across to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it, and it helps us spread the word and reach the masses. Likewise, if you know anyone that might benefit from the content we create, then please go ahead and share this with them.
You've been listening to Toolbox Talks by The Site Shed. For more great content just like this, head across to thesiteshed.com and join the amazing community of savvy trade-based business owners.